Welcome to Commander Central, episode 230, and today we'll be talking about our favorite non-legendary cards from Commander Legends. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going today?
It's Friday. It's warm out. It should not be 70 degrees in the middle of November, beginning of November, in my opinion, but hey, I'll take it.
I had to shovel snow last month, and it's 72 out now, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know whether to expect a horrible winter or a calm winter. I'm not sure how this is going to go.
Yeah, no, I have no clue.
I actually had to dig my shorts out of storage just for this week because I'm like, well, I put them away because it's been, 32 degrees. It snowed
Right.
2 weeks ago. And now it's like, oh, where did I put those?
I'm just dealing with, always having a swamp when I'm walking around. So
Yes.
That's how I'm living.
Yeah.
Totally get that. So we're in November now. We're approaching up on that holiday time of year, so our schedule is probably going to get, in everyone's life, is going to be a little bit weird. Is anyone doing anything this year, or is COVID keeping everyone lying low for the holidays?
Honestly, I think it's going to keep me lying low for the most part.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
really doing much either. I mean, I'll go to my sister's for Thanksgiving, assuming everyone's healthy. But this is going to kind of be an uneventful end of the year, I would say, for the most part. So
Yeah, same here. I mean, I'll see my dad because he's local and, we are kind of in that same social bubble. We only really hang out with each other. So yeah, I'll be laying low. We won't be traveling or anything. No one's going to travel to us. So yeah, quiet end of the year for once.
although I think the three of us are going to try to get together and play some games on a weekend here coming up, some actual in-person games. And
I
Yeah.
know.
so, yeah.
I'm hoping Chris still remembers how to play Magic.
Oh, you'll be surprised. I'll show you how to do this. I draw 2 cards every turn.
Right, that's what it is. It's like a holy mind is automatically in play.
Only if you're mono white.
Has anyone actually got any in on webcam or anything? I know Max played somewhere on a stream last week, I believe.
I did? Oh, wow. I don't even remember that.
The time all kind of blends together currently.
It does. I feel like I have not played games in at least a week and a half. So I need to change that.
You say, I played, so this is Friday, we're recording, so the show airs on Monday. I played the previous, it would have been Thursday night, with the guys at the Guardian Project, and Zuby from Magic with Zuby was on as well, so we played a couple games. That was a good time. I fired up my Adelaide's deck, and then I played my wife's Angel Tribal deck in the second game, so I appreciate them having me on. That was fun. And I think you played on with those guys a couple weeks ago, didn't you, Max?
Yeah, I think I was 2 weeks before you played with them, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I got land hosed with Dramoka in the first game, and the second game, Tuvasa just wasn't faster than the deck that won, unfortunately. But yeah, I tuned in and watched you play, and it was great. I always love seeing Adelaide's just kick off and just all of a sudden win out of nowhere, so that's always fun to watch. And it was cool to see you avenge me and take both games.
Oh yeah, I did. My wife's deck. That one was interesting. It came down to the end with my Angel deck out, and it was very much like we were both down at low life, and he'd play a blocker and I'd get an answer, and he'd play something and I'd have an answer, and we had no cards in hand in like top deck mode, but I eked that one out. And then you and I played, actually, Max, with a couple of listeners. We played the Chris Von Doom and Lenny Woolley on, was it Saturday?
It was Saturday, so that would have been the last time I played Magic.
Yeah, and Chris won one with his Lord Windgrace deck, doing Lord Windgrace stuff. And did you win the first game, or did Chris win that one too? I don't even remember now.
Because time is just melting together.
Yeah.
I don't think I won any games that night.
Okay.
Lenny played Grothama in one of them and just went off. Oh, Lenny won the first game with his new Linvala Prison Warden deck.
Yep. Which was kind of a cool deck. I mean, it wasn't doing anything specific necessarily to Linvala. He was basically using Linvala as a way to save his creature suite, and he had, a suite of just every disgusting creature you could run in those color combinations. So it was a repeatable way he could reanimate and bring back to give his stuff hexproof and or indestructible as needed, which made his board really difficult to deal with. And when your board is, Consecrated Sphinxes and Elesh Norns and things like that, finding an opening was really tricky against that deck. So that's right. He ran away with that one pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty technically challenging game for the three of us, because it was one of those, like, we actually had to work together to stack the interaction, the removal spells. So, someone had to respond to the sacrifice, and then, okay, now you can get rid of the Elesh Norn before the Linvala trigger goes off. And it was very teamwork enabled game, which was a lot of fun and kind of hard to do over webcam.
Yes. Yeah. Much more so than it is in person. Well, my moment of pride actually in that game on the Guardian Project podcast stream was I was being swung at with a Zergo Helm Smasher that had swords on with protection from my commander, and I had to generous gift my own treasure token to make a 3/3 green beast token to block with. So I had to generous gift my own thing for a blocker to buy myself a turn for a crackback too. So that was my professional EDH play of the week. Well, if you out there in listener land like to get a hold of us just to say hi or talk about some cool games you played, how would you do that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com. And you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers if you are so inclined to support us financially. And if you're not, that's totally okay. A like, a follow, an upvote, a comment on any of those platforms definitely does the show a lot of good. And you know what? Just listening to us once a week is perfect in our hearts.
Yes.
But we do want to say hello to one new patron this week in Steve Lehey. So thank you for supporting us and welcome to the group.
Welcome aboard, Steve. Thanks a lot. And thanks for everyone for listening and supporting us any way you can. It's a big deal and means a lot and keeps the lights on in our respective locations as we're not recording in the same room anymore. So thanks, everyone. We really do appreciate it.
Max is still in the dungeon, so
still pantsless, still in the basement.
Hey, it's wintertime. I got to get a new chair. This metal folding chair, my butt's going to start sticking eventually.
And I think, Max, you have an announcement about an upcoming stream here.
Yeah. So Sunday, November 15th, Dana and I will be on the Scrap Trawlers stream at 7 p.m. Central to announce our episode, which we will be actually playing on in December. So all of our fans head over to twitch.tv/scraptrawlers around 7 p.m. Central on Sunday the 15th to check out what our stream is going to be about and some other goodies going on during that episode.
Yeah, looking forward to that. That should be a good time. We already have some of the stuff figured out behind the scenes about what putting together for decks. Have you worked on yours at all yet, Max?
I'll tell you if you tell me your commander.
I've got some. That's what I've been trying to figure out, actually, because there's a limited amount given the constraints of what we're doing. I don't know if I don't want to reveal that just yet. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to think like what is everyone else going to pick, so I like don't overlap with that. So I've got it down to 2 that I'm choosing between right now.
I have started building one of my choices.
Okay.
And I do have a backup in case I don't like how this is going, but you know, time is running out, so I might just stick with my original plan A.
There we go. Well, we'll find out everything soon enough here.
One final announcement. I have been graciously invited back to Commander Ad Populum by Ryan Paneff. So we'll be recording that here in the quick future, and that show will be airing on November 18th. So head over to Commander Ad Populum YouTube channel. One of our patrons, Tyler Coates, is his editor. He's been doing a lot of great graphical overlays. Check out that episode and just go check out Ryan's content either through Commander Ad Populum or, of course, Commander Cookout.
Very cool. All right. Should we jump into this main topic since we've got 117 cards to talk about here, I think?
Something like that.
If I'm looking at these numbers right. And this is where we even get into the legends.
It's a big set.
So, overall, I'll ask you guys, now that everything is fully spoiled, we've looked at it, what are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Chris. Are you happy with what you've seen for this set?
Nope, it's all trash.
Okay. All right.
Garbage. I mean, I can't
That's
believe
the show, everybody. Come back next week.
I can't believe they're reprinting Scroll Rack and Mana Drain and all that stuff. I mean, that's
Vampiric Tutor.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. No, I'm pretty happy about it. Everything overall looks really good. Seems to be all cohesive, whatever the word is, with everything. And it looks like it'll be really fun to draft because everything should fall in line with each other really well.
Max, how about you?
I finally sat down and looked at the full preview. The full set is out on the mothership, and
yep.
I think Scryfall's fully converted everything to English, if that's your language of choice. I love it. I love this set. It's exactly, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, this makes me feel like I'm stepping into EDH for the first time all over again. So I'm stoked. I already pulled a Dana Roach and spreadsheeted the cards I need for each of my decks. And now this weekend, I'm going to try to hopefully avoid making my brain melt by making all the cuts actually and getting all that planned out.
Nice. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you guys are. I liked it a lot. Chris mentioned some of these reprints. That's a tough kind of balance to find because you want them to put really good reprints into a set, obviously. But at some point, they do the math on those kind of things. And like when there's a bunch of high value reprints in a set, the price of the packs then go up. That's why you get, $10 Masters sets when they're chock full of $100 reprints. So considering the reprints we got in this set for packs that are relatively normally priced, where there's Vampiric Tutors and there's Mana Drains and there's Scroll Racks and, Staff of Dominion, and there's a lot of really good reprints in addition to cards that are clearly going to be really good on their own, more moving forward in the future. And they kept it as a reasonable price point. I don't know how you can complain about that. It's going to be a phenomenal draft set. It's got a ton of cool new cards for Commander. It's got a ton of value and things needed reprints. Even the box topper is a card that's in demand that we needed. So
right,
the pieces are just all here. It's a pretty sweet Christmas present, I think, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward to cracking these in the very near future.
Yeah, I just want a Mana Drain that's in the full art version.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
All right, so we're just going basically by the numbers. So we've just thrown the cards in that sequence. If you're wondering what the sequencing we have here is, and we're talking about cards that we think are meaningful. In the first one here, we have Akroma's Will, which is the first of the Will cycle. It's 3 and a white and instant speed. And this cycle of cards have 2 modes. You choose a mode, or you choose both modes if you control a commander as you cast a spell. And the 2 modes on Akroma's Will are creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, or creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. So if you cast both modes, creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, double strike, lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors.
It says I win the game. That's what it says.
I mean, it's White's Overrun, kind of. I mean, maybe if you're playing 1/1s and they get double strike and they become 2/2s, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're playing 3/3s and they are suddenly hitting for 6s, and you're gaining that much life, that's kind of works like an overrun to a degree, or it's going to possibly kill someone. It's going to put you out of range for someone else's crackback.
So Max discussed this green-white tokens deck that he's making, with a general
Yeah.
+1 mana. And you play this card, even if
Right.
they are tokens, you gain protection from all colors. They all gain, lifelink, double strike, indestructible, all that stuff. And you swing through, that's pretty much just lethal right there for 4 mana.
Well, and it also winds up being a heroic intervention. I mean, a heroic intervention gives your creatures hexproof and indestructible. This gives your creatures indestructible and protection from all colors, which is functionally going to be hexproof unless someone's casting one of the 4 colorless instants or sorceries in the game. So basically, this winds up, kind of having a hidden mode of being a heroic intervention in White.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. I was looking at all my decks. The one thing I found myself thinking was, sometimes maybe you'd rather just use a counter spell to save your creatures, but having the option to give them that double strike and flying and man, this is just a phenomenally good card.
It is. It's one of the better cards as an instant based in white.
Yeah.
That, that's a creature protection type build. Whereas I've seen a lot of the other ones where it's like, this looks good, but this is more of a 60 card deck, not a 100 card deck type of card.
I'm actually surprised this wasn't a mythic. It feels like the kind of card they make a mythic.
Yes.
I've seen some people talk about this on Twitter, and they're comparing it to True Conviction.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that comparison? I'm obviously going to play this card in a bunch of my decks, but is it something where you should cut True Conviction?
No.
Because...
No.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think it doesn't stack with True Conviction, but it kind of does. It does give flying. It does give vigilance. True Conviction is just lifelink and double strike. So you still get some bonuses out of this. And like I mentioned, the ability to use it as a way to save all of your stuff. It's also super, I don't know, I myself, I'm running True Conviction in 2 decks currently, and I think I might put this in both of them, and I don't think I want to pull True Conviction out.
Well, True Conviction is a static effect, whereas this is not. You get to use this once as one and done, and I'd rather have the static effect over it.
I don't know if I want to have it over it, but I don't. I think they both have their uses that aren't fighting one another necessarily.
Yes.
Not to say yes, once in a while you're gonna have True Conviction out and you top deck this and it doesn't do you much good. But I feel like for every one time that kind of thing happens, there's 10 situations where you're glad you have both of them in your deck.
Right.
Max, I'll throw it to you since I feel like you're definitely running this in at least one deck.
Yeah, so we're Archon of Coronation. It's a creature Archon. It has a 5/5 body, and it's 4 white for a casting cost. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. So that's a returning mechanic to Commander Legends, one of my favorites from Conspiracy, that is. And then as long as you're the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. That's awesome. I love not losing life in EDH because that means I'll probably win. Unfortunately, this does not stop commander damage, so you need to remember that.
Yes, it is. It is not quite Platinum Angel where you can't lose the game. You can still lose to commander damage. You can still lose to infect. You can still lose to getting milled out, whatever. But for the most part, it like functionally kind of does that. And in the preventing you from losing life then shuts off some other of your opponent's abilities in a way that maybe Platinum Angel doesn't as well. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It functions a little bit differently than that card, but it is going to mostly do the same thing. And it's got the Monarch stapled on, which is a really nice ability in Commander. Is this one you're going to put in Dromoka?
Yes, this is definitely at the top of the list on my spreadsheet for Dromoka.
I assumed as much. Yeah, very cool card. I've got no room for it, but this is one I expect to see. It's a mythic. It's 6 mana. There's only so much room for those kind of things in decks, but it will pop up in decks that care about the Monarch or flying or whatever. It's just a really useful body for what it does.
I think it's just good as a 6/6 or a 5/5 for 6 mana. Pardon me. Wow, brain farts today. And in mono white, just being able to slap the Monarch on the table, period, is good for you.
Absolutely. What do we have next here, Chris?
We have something called an Armored Sky Hunter. And you know, this card actually reminds me of like cards from like Theros or something like that. The art and everything else. That's what it reminds me of. This is a Cat Knight. So for 4 mana, 3 colorless and a white, you get a 3/3 flyer. And whenever Armored Sky Hunter attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put an aura or equipment card from among them onto the battlefield. If an equipment is put on the battlefield this way, you may attach it to a creature you control. Put the rest of those cards at the bottom of your library in a random order. So honestly, this card is just going to go in equipment decks, more than likely. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't play this, period, like that. If you don't, then I'm going to have a nice little chat with you and be like, look at this card. You know you want it. It's so good.
Yeah, especially Boros decks have lately, and including in this set, tended to lean into equipment. So having a way to get free card advantage in white, particularly in Boros, is really, really good. I'm actually probably going to put it in my Sigarda Enchantress deck. 3/3 is not nothing, and at least there, mathematically, it's something that can come down before Sigarda does on turn 5. So then when I cast Sigarda on turn 5, oftentimes the problem is I don't have mana left over to like put an enchantment or something on her. Well, I can swing with the Armored Sky Hunter that I put down on turn 4. Again, I'm assuming no ramp. And then, dig down, find that aura, and then put it on Sigarda that turn to have her suited up and ready to go for the next turn swing. So I'm probably even going to run it in there as well. Yeah, I like this card. Yeah. Are you going to try it in your Tuvasa deck, Max?
It's on the list. I really need to look at the differential between non-aura and auras in that deck, and I'm pretty sure it leans heavily to auras, but the fact that it's not an enchantment creature kind of deters me from running it because I don't really have a way to abuse that ETB. Or, it's an attack trigger. Wow, Max needs to learn how to read, everybody. Yeah, this is definitely going in that deck. Never mind.
Yeah, because every turn you get the value off it.
Yeah, never mind. It's going in the deck. It's a solid include.
All right. So next we'll jump to the Court of Grace. This is a cycle, so I think we'll talk about all of them as we go down the list here. Court of Grace is 2 white. When Court of Grace enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Again, we're saying the Monarch, and it will pop up a lot in cards moving forward. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, and if you're the Monarch, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying instead. Obviously what's great about Bitter Blossom is it only costs 2 mana. The efficiency is really, really crazy on it. So, if you're looking at this in that context, you're paying twice as much to get the Bitter Blossom token, but it doesn't do the damage to you. And it gives you the Monarch, which is a much bigger deal in white than I think maybe what people realize, because it gives you draw. And if you manage to hold on to that Monarch, it's making 4/4 white angel creature tokens instead of 1/1 spirits. And the nice part about it is that white spirit creature token with flying that you makes it way easier for you to hold on to that Monarch, because it's giving you that blocker you have right there, let alone once it starts kicking out angels. This is really good, I think. It's also not dependent on your deck necessarily. I mean, it is to a degree, but like your deck doesn't have to be doing a real specific thing to take advantage of this, where a couple of the other ones we'll talk about maybe do. So this is one I like a lot. What do you guys think?
I think this is almost an auto include in anything that's not, strictly focused on doing something in white. If you have white splashing in and it's not really doing anything, this card should just be slapped in the deck, because it generates value just on its own. Doesn't even have to do anything else. Just come into play, spit out tokens, get the Monarch on the table, which then turns into a political bargain with other people. Yeah. And I mean, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chris. I've played enough games where the Monarch has become a thing in a game, and I've had games where nobody really cares about it. Like, cool, I guess I'll draw an extra card here or there, and so someone hangs onto
Sure.
that Monarch token for quite a while, with or without creating a blocker. And then there are the games where the Monarch goes around every single player's turn at the combat step. So I think this is definitely going to be a little meta dependent, a little what your deck wants to do. I like this card. You're making tokens, and then you make bigger tokens if you're the Monarch. This is great.
Yes, indeed. All right, Chris, throw the next one over to you. This is a card that was previewed by, I don't remember what show it was, but they were like 3 really good-looking guys. So, want to tell us about Promise of Tomorrow?
Yeah, Promise of Tomorrow. This card looks really familiar. Did I talk? Hold on a second.
I've seen it somewhere
Wait.
before.
Oh my goodness, I might have. I actually had to pull out my notebook. I'm like, yeah, I did talk about this one, didn't I?
Is this the one from the video with the dogs? The people with like the 3 different dogs?
I think so, yeah. I think that's where I saw it.
It's the same kid, Max. It's the same
Different
kid.
dog, different kid.
So we got Promise of Tomorrow. This is a 3-mana enchantment, 2 colorless and a white. And it states, whenever a creature you control dies, exile it. At the beginning of each end step, if you control no creatures, sacrifice Promise of Tomorrow and return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under your control.
Super cool card.
So, yeah, it's really good. The thing I like about this a lot is it says each end step, so this could go off on someone else's turn too. Like, say someone else wraths the board, and it's like, okay, at the beginning of your end step, I just bring back all my guys that you destroyed. You could play it as, in a nice Pillow Fort deck and blow up everything repeatedly and then sacrifice it on your turn. So, I mean, either way it works out. I can't see anything wrong with this card, aside from it is probably going to be really mana intensive and might not do oodles of stuff, but you could bring back at least one creature for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to generate a ton of value for it to actually work. I think the concern I would have is there's so much stuff that functions off exile in Commander to so many, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile effects, or Oblivion Ring kind of stuff as removal. I think if your deck happens to already be running a bunch of sack outlets to give you the option to, like, oh, someone casts a, exile effect on my thing, I'm just going to sack it and bring it back eventually with a promise. I think it's way better if you happen to have that kind of deck built that way already. I also think the deck where weirdly enough, it might wind up shining is things like the Ur-Dragon, because it's only 1 white, so it's easy to cast even in a 5-color deck. And that's a deck filled with creatures that are, 6 mana, 7 mana a lot of times for these big, huge Haymaker dragons. And being able to salvage all of those very easily, drop this Promise of Tomorrow, and someone wipes the board, which they feel like they need to do because you've been getting so many free dragons out, that doesn't solve the problem for them. They just pop back with this card that, 3 mana is a pretty good value to bring back, a couple of dragons.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I didn't think about it that far in. Yeah, something with big CMC, I mean, even if you only lose 1 or 2 to it and then they come back, that's value over top of everybody else.
You bet. And you can, if you choose to, if you're feeling there's a little bit of a risk to it, but like you can let your commander go to it too and bring it back if you want to. So yeah,
yep,
it's super cool. Max, what do we got next?
Next is Slash the Ranks. It's a sorcery for 3 white, and it says destroy all creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders. It's a really unique wrath, in my opinion. We've seen stuff that's somewhat similar in something like Single Combat, where that's a sacrifice effect and it hits creatures or planeswalkers, but I really like this because it's going to let me keep my commander, which is a big body, or
Sure.
could be a big body, or maybe it's your combo piece. Like, you need your commander around to keep your combo going. And it's a really, in my opinion, a well-costed Planeswalker Wrath. We don't have a lot of those right now. So even if you're just using it for Planeswalkers that don't say can be your commander, I think this adds a lot of value to any deck that's running white.
I'm torn about it. There are times I look at it, I think that makes sense to me, and I can see why I would run it. Then I look at it and I'm like, well, I feel like Tragic Arrogance is something is much easier to get the value out of and keep your own thing up and alive. I'm like, okay, so do I want a second one of those? And then I'm like, well, I'm in white, so I could also have access to Austere Command, which costs 1 more, but it's so modular and it's so easy to work around stuff. And Wrath of God is so efficient, and I feel like the biggest problem here is it's a good board wipe that's you're dealing with playing in colors that have ones that are probably better. So I think that's the biggest problem with it is it's just fighting for a slot in a color that has a bunch of board wipes that I feel like are maybe probably better than this. So that's it. It just feels like a little, it's just somewhat outclassed by other things that exist.
It's definitely a Wrath that would go in a Voltron type deck.
Sure.
Just through the simple fact that usually your commander's the one who's getting suited up anyway.
Yeah.
So why not kill everything else? Yeah, maybe they could be able to keep a commander, but your commander more than likely is like a 20/20 with trample and double strike and all that stuff anyways. So you don't care if they have the commander block, and I'm still just going to go right through it.
And it does generate a little bit of extra value if you're playing with partners, because you get to keep your two commanders up. So that is something worth noting as well. So in a partner deck, that might make it stand out a little bit more than I think it does otherwise.
Next, we have Triumphant Reckoning, and this is one of the cycle of the 5 of them that cost like a bazillion mana. So this is 6 and triple white for a sorcery that says return all artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. And, okay, that's just good enough. Yeah, good thing it doesn't say anymore. It says just return them all from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a mass reanimate of your stuff. Granted, you don't get creatures, but white creatures really usually aren't the best to begin with most of the time. But the artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers are huge. And already I know, Danny, you're probably going to slap this in Jeru, aren't you? And just go, guess what? Here comes back all my stupid planeswalkers that we finally killed.
And the deck has a good bit of enchantments in it as well.
Yes.
And I'm trying to decide if I want it in Sigarda for that same reason. I'm already running Open the Vaults, which brings everyone's stuff back, although it usually winds up bringing enough of my stuff back. That much more of my stuff back that it's worth running. But I'm like, maybe I'll run this over instead of Open the Vaults there as well. So I have at least 2 decks, I think, that I want to run it in. I would bet Max is at least considering it hit for his Tuvasa deck.
Ooh, the swing and a miss, sir. I am not.
No, okay.
Oh, triple white probably. That's probably what's hard in that deck.
That hurts in 3 colors for sure.
Yes, but just 9 mana in general. Tuvasa is, I think, my deck with the lowest average CMC. I think it's actually lower than Brago.
Okay.
And the highest costing spell in that deck is Nylea's Colossus, and that only has a single green pip. So the fact that this doesn't bring back my commander doesn't help.
Sure.
So I can't bring Tuvasa back along with everything else that's going to go onto it. So yeah, if this was an Estrid deck, this would totally go with that. But yeah, in my Tuvasa build, it's supposed to be lean and mean and fast. And I really don't want to get hosed by holding this 9 mana card in my hand.
That makes sense.
And not being able to do anything with it for a long time.
It does feel a little, I think it's good. It's very good. I feel like I thought it was going to be slightly, I don't know what I would have changed or what you'd have done differently, but it feels maybe a little safe, I think is the word I would use.
I definitely agree with that. We're never going to see Replenish again.
Right, yes.
Open the Vaults was the closest we're going to get.
Yeah.
And it's hard to look at this card and not compare it to Replenish.
Right.
Because that's what everybody kind of knows. So removing Replenish from the equation, yeah, this is a really cool card, but in comparison, it's extremely safe.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Up next, we have Body of Knowledge, which is a creature, 3 blue, it's star power and toughness. Body of Knowledge's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and you have no maximum hand size. And whenever Body of Knowledge is dealt damage, draw that many cards. So if, it gets hit for 10, you're drawing 10. Whatever amount of damage is dealt to it, you're drawing that many cards. This is a super cool card. I like it a lot. I say that, and then I struggle to think of what to do with it. Because if it was in different colors, it's really easy to deal damage to your own creatures. Green has a lot of ways to do it, including Grathama right there in the command zone. Black has a ton of ways to deal it. Red has a ton of ways to deal it. Blue really doesn't, so I think it's tough to kind of, other than making it the blocker you absolutely don't want to swing into. So yeah, I think you have to be playing in a color, if you're playing red, blue, and your deck, for whatever reason, is running a ton of Earthquake kind of effects, absolutely, it seems like it's a really great card in there, but I was struggling to think of what that deck would be. What do you guys think? Do you have any thoughts on it, Max?
I definitely see this. I'm not a big fan of this card. I think it's cool, but I just see this as another Labman Thassa's Oracle enabler, essentially.
Oh, sure.
It's another way to have no maximum hand size, another way to draw a bunch of cards, whether you use it as a blocker or, like you said, Dana, you put it in a red-blue deck and you can, rolling Earthquake it a bunch of times. But I really just see this as another piece to those Labman decks that are out there, which is not my type of play style, but I totally understand the people who like to play that way.
Sure. Yeah, if you're doing that, this absolutely, I see that for sure. You have any thoughts on it, Chris?
I just see this as another Pillow Fort card. I just had Pillow Fort on my mind today for some reason. I don't know why. And this would actually make that Pillow Fort deck a little bit better. do the simple fact of, you're drawing cards, everyone else is drawing cards, you're kind of stalling the game out, but your guy's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if anyone does attack you, you block and he gets even bigger.
Right.
And then you can just come back through for like an alpha strike. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, it actually plays in a little bit better than some of the other cards they play. So I don't know.
How about, I'll throw the next one to you, Chris, the Hull Breacher. You can talk about that here.
So we got Hull Breacher, which is a merfolk pirate. R. 2 colorless and a blue. And then it's a 3/2. But also, I want to bring up the fact that there are a lot of merfolk in this set. I was very happy about that.
A lot of pirates, too.
Maybe merfolk and pirates, and I saw elves, too. I mean, maybe we can get, more variants of these decks. So, anyways, for Hull Breacher, which is our merfolk pirate, it has Flash. And if an opponent would draw a card except the first one that they draw in each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So, how about that Labman combo? Oh, I draw. No, you don't. I get a treasure token. What's up, homie?
Well, there's a lot of axes here where this is a really good card. It's a good card as just a way to, like, if you're playing people that tend to draw a ton of cards, it's a way to stop that for one, and you to gain a bunch of extra value for it. So, like, just as a kind of value piece, kind of like maybe Notion Thief or something, it's really, really good. If you are playing some kind of a, deck that cares about artifacts or even specifically cares about treasures, it's a way to generate treasure or generate a bunch of artifacts off someone else's draw. If you are playing a merfolk deck, there's a limited amount of really, really good merfolk. So like you can just jam this in your merfolk deck and draw a couple, even if you just, just do it in response to a harmonize or something and get a couple treasures, and that's really, and your opponent doesn't draw those cards, you've gotten really good value, and it's part of your merfolk deck that are probably looking for good merfolk all the time. Pirates even more so. There's a limited amount of really good pirates out there, so same thing applies here, if not more than it does for merfolk. There's just a ton of situations, if you're playing a Farah God of the Polis who wants to play flash creatures to get that free draw, here's a really good flash creature that you can play in that deck. So there's just a bunch of different spaces that I think want this card. Competitive EDH players have been talking about wanting it for their deck as well. So this is one of those ones that, not that we're a finance podcast, but like this card has got so many different homes that I would wager it's going to wind up being relatively expensive just for that reason.
Yeah, it's a really good card.
Yeah.
I just want to pair it with Smothering Tithe, because then when they go to draw that extra card their turn, it's like, cool, did you pay for that? Nope, so I'm going to create 2 treasures because I still get it no matter what.
And then I will, my turn, Revel in Riches. Yeah.
Yep.
Esper Treasures.
Another good Pillow Fort card. Pillow Fort card.
Esper Treasures.
Max, will throw Mnemonic Deluge to you. The first one here we're talking about in this cycle of 10 mana sorceries we got in every color.
Yeah, Mnemonic Deluge is 6 and triple blue for a sorcery, and it says exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, copy that card 3 times, and you may cast the copies without paying their mana cost, then exile Mnemonic Deluge. The fact that this hits any graveyard is awesome.
Chandra's Ignition 3 times.
Right.
What's up?
Oh. Or not even that, or even just like Fact or Fiction, or any, 9 mana to draw, a handful of cards might not be great, but there's going to be some spicy targets, whether it's in this set or other people's sets are, hey, if you're behind on lands, I don't know how you are at 9 mana, maybe you have rocks, but copy that Kodama's Reach 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, which, in a landfall deck, if you're playing in landfall with access to blue and there's a couple of different variants out there, that's probably well worth doing at some point too, even if that's all you do with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any decks that I want to run this in, though, myself.
The triple blue is really, hard to justify in a 2-color deck that isn't already heavy blue.
Right, yeah. In my mono blue deck, where it would be meaningless, I tend to not have, it's running instant sorceries that aren't, they're all pretty interchangeable. Like, okay, I could cast 3 brainstorms, but that isn't that I'll make 3 drakes in Talran, but it isn't that big of a deal.
Well, but you get to cast the copies, Dana, so you do have some stuff in there that cares about whether you cast something or not.
It is a cast, right.
So you would actually get 6 copies?
Sure. Yeah, it's just not a card. I think that there's plenty of situations where hey, I'm going to cast someone's extra turn spell. Basically, It's at that point it's a time stretch, a better time stretch, an expropriate almost, where everyone, it's an expropriate where everyone chooses wrong.
You always choose time, right?
Right, yeah. That's the rule. Always give extra turns.
Always give extra turns and take your bathroom break.
Up next, we have Sakashima's Protege, 4 blue. It has Flash and Cascade, which is a returning mechanic in the set for 3-1. You may have Sakashima's Protege enter the battlefield as a copy of any permanent that entered the battlefield this turn. So the way Cascade works, because Cascade is on cast, the thing is going to come into play off your Cascade before Sakashima's Protege comes into play. So presumably you're going to have it come into play as a copy of either something you cast first before this, or something that you hopefully hit with that Cascade trigger that's really good. It's a cool card. Cascade is always interesting. Again, I don't know if I have any decks that want this, but there's a lot of decks that are built heavily around clones and built heavily around Cascade and want that kind of effect. So people are really excited about it, even if maybe I'm not one of them and don't really have a place that would use it. Do either of you two have any decks that want this?
Not right now.
I originally toyed around with it for my Psy Master Thopterus deck, because that's all about clones and stuff, but
Sure.
I don't really want to cascade into, a lot of artifacts and not a lot of artifact creatures, so I'm not even going to be able to copy that, mana vault that gets cascaded off of it.
Right.
And it's also kind of, again, I cast it knowing I probably already had a target on the battlefield, whether it's, a Thopter I already have, or a Chief of the Foundry, or something that's buffing all my artifacts, but I just don't see it making the cut in the big picture.
Yeah, it's a very specific card. I think the decks that want it like it a lot. And it's not the kind of thing where you're just going to put in a generic deck. I think, hey, this is my, Max Tuvasa deck. Like, there are some cards that just weirdly work in random decks. I think this is much more specific. Your specific deck is one that wants it, otherwise you don't. Max, next card we'll throw to you.
Sakashima's Will is a sorcery for 3 and a blue. You choose one of the options, but if you control a commander as you cast the spell, you may choose both. And the two options are target opponent chooses a creature they control and you gain control of it, or choose a creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. So this is very similar to an instant from Core 20 called Masterful Replication, which is 5 and a blue and you choose one. You either create 2 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens, or you choose target artifact you control and each other artifact you control becomes a copy of it.
Yep.
So that's the one I currently run in my Psy Master Thopter deck. I'm probably going to swap it for this card just because it's cheaper to cast. And the sorcery speed I really don't mind, because the few times I've been able to cast Masterful Replication, it's been on my turn and it's just to turn all my Thopters into Wormcoil engines. So it's not like I'm using it for defense. I'm using it strictly for offense. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a cool card.
The advantage Masterful Replication offers is you can turn, if you're playing a deck with a ton of treasures or like a bunch of non-creature artifacts, you can make those also into whatever the Wormcoil engine, which is what I've tended to use it for as well. But it's also 7 mana. The 4 is way easier to use in this deck and get your other stuff done. And you can, take control of a creature is a much more useful mode, because it's not until end of turn, you just gain control of it. Granted, they choose, but if you choose the right opponent, they might not have a good option. So you're just gaining control of a creature for good. That's a much better alternative than the 2 golems winds up being almost always with the other card. I'm pondering it maybe in Vela instead of Masterful Replication as well. Part of the problem with Replication is if Vela isn't out, I have to cast her for 6 mana, assuming there's no commander tax, and then have the mana available for Replication, which is another 7, which is, it's a lot of mana to ask for. In this case, I can get away with it for doing 4 less. And the reason that's relevant with Vela in particular is because of her exit the battlefield trigger. If I make everything a copy of her, I get the amount of Velas I've copied times the amount of Velas I've copied plus 1. So if Vela's out and there's 3 creatures and I make them all into Velas with this, then it's 3 times 4, 12 damage to everybody. If there's 4 out, it's 4 times 5 and it's 20. If there's 5 out, it's 5 times 6 and it's 30. So just being able to copy my commander in that deck deals a significant amount of damage to the whole table. And it's nice with Replication, but the 7 mana, if I don't have my commander out already, makes it really difficult to do both things simultaneously, and it's much easier to do both things simultaneously with this card. So it's got better modes, I think, and if that's the kind of thing you're doing, it's easier to do both of those things. I will grab the next one, because it's a card I want to put in a deck. Sphinx of the Second Sun for 8 mana, flying at the beginning of your post-combat main phase. You get an additional beginning phase after this phase. So that's confusing a little bit. The worst case scenario here, basically, with this, if you're not trying to do weird abusive stuff, is you get to draw an extra card. So assuming this is a round, basically when it's in play, draw an extra card and untap all of your stuff.
Yep.
I don't know. That's like, if that's the worst case scenario, that's pretty good. Without even having to do any, without having to try to do any deviant stuff with it, that's probably worth 8 mana.
I think it is.
So I am absolutely putting this in my Sphinx deck. And hey, it's only 8 mana. It's a Sphinx.
It's only 8 mana.
They're all 8 mana. So I will definitely be finding a room for this. You guys have any plans or thoughts about it beyond that? I mean, there's definitely weird combo stuff that is possible that I've been reading people on Reddit. If I do this and this and this, I can take infinite whatevers.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to put it in my Amanatu deck just because that's a Approach of the Second Sun combo deck, and this just fits the theme as Sphinx of the Second Sun.
Sure,
so.
you bet. No, that's good enough.
Our next card we have on here is Court of Ambition. This is another one of the court series that we're discussing. So for 2 colorless and 2 black, we get an enchantment. And this one says, when Court of Ambition enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. This seems to be a trend going on here. But this one also reads differently than the last one, is that at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the monarch, instead, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. I already have a place for this card. It's
so
not even.
Do I.
It's a no-brainer. So.
Yeah, each opponent losing 3 life is not insignificant, and they'll probably take that too. Rather than discarding a card, it's pretty easy to I'll just lose 3 life. 6 life gets a little bit trickier, and at that point, for whatever reason, the math on that, it becomes I don't know if I can afford to lose 6 life, especially if you've already gotten dinged for it once or twice.
Yep, this is going in Mogus. I'm not even going to hesitate. It's getting slapped right. I don't know what I'm going to cut yet, but this is going in there.
What do you think about putting it max?
For sure, Regnan and Krav is going to get it, just because it's life loss. If I have Blood Bond out, there we go.
Sure.
And end the game. It's cool. I think it's also going to go in a deck I might be building because of Commander Legends, which we'll cover in our Legends show next week.
Okay.
But yeah, I really like this court. So far, I've liked the white one and the black one. We didn't really talk about the blue one, so it must mean we didn't like it.
So we can address it briefly. The blue one mills people, and I guess the point I would make about the blue one is if you're not playing a mill deck, milling people basically oftentimes reads let them draw cards.
Pretty much.
So if you're playing mill, it's really good, and if you're not playing mill, I feel like it's almost genuinely bad.
Right. Yeah, and I think the monarch clause on that one is they mill 10 instead of 2.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. No, so far I like a lot of these cards. So
yeah, me too.
They're cool cards.
We have another Monarch one up next, which is the Monarch ones that are not on courts or something are kind of cool. And this is Feast of Succession for black. All creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn, and you become the Monarch. So it's a pseudo board wipe. We've seen that all creatures get -4/-4 kind of effect before, which tends to be better in Standard than it is in Commander, but you see it in Commander sometimes. I've definitely cast Toxic Deluges for 4 before. So being able to get the Monarch on this wipe, I think, is kind of useful. I don't know if I have any deck that wants it, but I think if you're playing a Monarch deck, you might like this. Do you guys have any? Is this good enough, do you think?
I think it's too high costed because Languish is only 4 mana
right.
to give everything -4/-4. So 2 extra mana, you get to be the Monarch, whereas I'd rather spend 4 mana on the court, to become the Monarch over it, and then spend another 4 mana next turn on Damnation or something, and just guaranteed board wipe.
Yeah, kind of my thought as well.
Yeah, I agree. 6 mana, like Chris said, comparing it to Languish, 2 mana more just to become the Monarch. I'm also not a fan, and I get it. I get why it's just flat out -4/-4 until end of turn versus -1/-1 counters, because that would have had to been an archetype they built into the set.
Right.
I think if this would say -4/-1/-1 counters for 6 mana and you become the Monarch, I think that drastically changes how good this card is, because those counters don't leave.
Yeah.
Where, Magical Christmas Land is, you wipe out a bunch of creatures out of your opponents and maybe a couple of yours, so you might have a blocker to hopefully keep the Monarch, but if you can't wipe out a lot of your opponent's stuff and you're left with a blocker and they have 2 attackers, well, kiss that Monarch goodbye next turn, essentially.
This card, though, definitely reads to me a draft card. When you're drafting,
totally.
This is probably super phenomenal.
Yeah, right. You love seeing this in your packs when you're doing a draft of this set, for sure.
Yes.
Up next, we have Nadier's Nightblade, Elf Warrior, 1/3. Whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So we have an Aristocrat kind of effect that only cares about tokens, which I guess sounds like it matters, but like every Aristocrats deck I've ever played against is doing that kind of thing primarily with tokens, not exclusively, but like 80% of the time you're taking damage off a Blood Artist, it's because someone has skull clamped a token or something anyway. So it's just one more of those effects, and I feel like this is perhaps going in one of Max's decks as well.
See, this is the benefit of not recording altogether anymore, because I'm doing a happy dance over here. Sitting here doing a happy dance because this is going straight into Regnan and Krav, because as it's just another, like you said, it's another Blood Artist, and seeing that deck does produce a lot of tokens, it's just another thing my opponents have to deal with while Krav eats and gets bigger and crushes my table.
Well, since Max is talking about that's yeah. I mean, it's those decks want plenty of those effects, and the more they get, the more they. It's kind of like an Enchantress and an Enchantment deck, where you're generally speaking just gonna run every new one they release. Kind of the same thing with these Aristocrats cards. There isn't really a density where like you have too many out because the effects all stack, and you're just trying to do the same amount of damage to everyone anyway. So the more you have, the better it tends to work. Yeah, really good in that deck, and it will see play and most people doing that kind of thing. The next one I'll throw to Chris, because I feel like this may also be a Mogus card.
Maybe. We have Opposition Agent. 2 colorless and a black for a 3/2 human rogue that has Flash. And then the other ability, so we're flashing this person in, and it goes, you control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. So this is kind of like a Stranglehold or whatever it was. Similar?
Yeah.
Except for they get to search, but you get to search what they want.
Right.
And then, while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were a mana of any color to cast them. I really like this card a lot. The only thing I don't like about this card is there are similar ones like this where you can, look through your opponent's library. If you're not playing with people that you know very well, a lot of people are kind of leery about letting you play, touch their cards and stuff like that. And also it slows the game way, way, way down because you're looking through, 70, 80 cards, depending on when this card's played. So you don't really know what you're going for. But the upside is there, so I don't know. I'm kind of torn on it. It's good, but it's bad at the same time.
It's basically unplayable on webcam.
Yes.
but kind of like we mentioned with Hullbreacher, human I guess isn't as relevant as Merfolk, but Rogue is the tribe that we've recently got a little bit of more support for, but those decks are always looking for good rogues, so number one is useful there. I would imagine CEDH players are going to be using this as a way to, shut off someone's Vamp Tutor or something, and just in general, being able to stop tutoring is pretty useful and can really kind of hose green ramp decks as well to a degree if you can just be like, well, I'll just find that land and use it, or fail to find if worst case. So yeah, it's a really, really strong card. I don't think it's going to be the kind of thing people are going to be thrilled to see happen. Like once in a while, someone's going to get totally boned when someone flashes this in response to their Evolving Wilds on, turn 3 or something. That's going to feel pretty bad. But I also feel like if you're using Opposition Agent to stop an Evolving Wilds on turn 3, I don't know if that's the best use of Opposition Agent. I think you want to hold that in your hand until you can hit a Demonic Tutor or something and totally.
Oh, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd jam it in there and be like, give me that land. Hand it over, buddy.
I have flashed in Aven Mind Sensor in response to fetch land, so I totally can see myself doing that same thing.
All right.
Well, especially if you're in black, you don't get to ramp really aside from mana rock. So if someone's ramping, why not take them off and
land.
Give yourself the ramp? Yeah.
And then shut off future searching as well until they deal with it. So next we have black's big sorcery mythic Profane Transfusion, 6 and triple black. 2 target players exchange life totals. Then you create an X colorless horror artifact creature token where X is the difference between those players' life totals. Life swap is something that shows up in Selenia Dark Angel decks for 1, so I imagine that deck likes it a lot. Totally screws things up if you're playing a deck with like a Necropotence or something, and you're just like, I'm just gonna bin 30, and then by the way, Profane Transfusion. There's a lot, and making a giant body in the process. There's a lot of really good uses there, and one that kind of isn't written on the card, but an exchange of life is is life gain in terms of things
Yes.
that trigger life gain. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I just built a Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose deck, and Veto deals damage to players whenever you gain life. So, if I'm swapping my life total with somebody else and functionally gaining 20 life, Veto then domes somebody for 20. So, like, in addition to swapping my life total, I can probably kill that person or at least kill somebody else with this if Veto happens to be out.
I like this card for the simple fact of, I'm thinking of like, we'll say like your Sigarda deck, for instance. You're at 100 life and one of the players on the board is only at 10. You cast this card and you go, you two are going to switch life totals and I'm going to kill you, because now you're only at 10 and I can get through to deal that much damage to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a way to deal with those Oloro type decks that tend to gain a hideous amount of life, and you're like, well, I guess maybe my 1/1 commander will eventually work you down. This is like one more way to kind of work around that kind of.
Yep. And if you swap players, with the player who's like way behind, give them the life boost or whatever, you're more likely to be able to take care of them than the player who's already, pretty much has the game in lockdown mode.
Mm-hmm. Max, we want to take Zat's Will next.
So Zat's Will is another card in the Will cycle. It's an instant for 4 and a black. And again, it says choose one, but if you control a commander as you cast it, you choose both. And the two options on this card are each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power, or exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards, then create X01 black Thrall creature tokens where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way.
So Max, do you have like 14 cards that you want to add to Ragnar Krav out of this set?
Do you really want to know the answer to that question?
I'm kind of curious because as I was reading the black cards and even the white ones to a degree, I'm like, that would work good in Ragnar Krav. I swear I said that in my head 10 times.
Let's put it like this, Dana. I have 12, so you're close. And it's getting to the point where I might just build a second Regnan and Krav deck and just swap the land base back and forth so I can build like a token version and a life shenanigan version, because that's kind of where these cards are for me. Is some do tokens, some do the life swapping stuff with, like the sorcery we just talked about, or a couple cards we'll talk about next week in the Legends show. So this is probably going to be the hardest deck for me to make cuts just because it's so two-sided with its theme. So I really need to figure out how to balance all of that.
This one is really good. Both those modes are good. If you can if you can fire off both modes simultaneously, it's really good. If you're playing something that cares about tokens, that's such good value. But even if you aren't, just generating a bunch of bodies, black tends to have ways to abuse those anyway. Yeah, this is just a really, really good card.
So
the exile of the graveyards is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like all modal spells, these are going to resolve in order if you get both. So if someone dumps a 12/12 and that's what gets exiled, cool, thank you.
Right.
I have a question, and this is for like all the wills and probably some of the other cards in this set. These just say if you control a commander. So what happens when you threaten someone's commander and gain control? Does that technically count as a commander?
It
or is
does.
It something you
should.
The commander properties don't change. So once a thing is a commander, like even if a commander is morphed, it remains a commander.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess in my brain, I'm like, I feel like, did they just not include a commander you control because there wasn't enough room, or does this just apply if I steal someone's commander and I can get it off then?
So the next card we have here, we're going to jump into the color of red, my favorite color, the best color of Magic. The rest of you guys are just confused, and one day I'll be able to, bring you over to the light side of the Force and all that. So we have Court of Ire, which is 3 colorless and double red for an enchantment. Another one of our court series. And now when this one comes in, you become the Monarch again. And at the beginning of your upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target. Mogus is in heaven right now. He loves this card. But wait, it gets better. If you're the Monarch, it deals 7 damage to that player or permanent instead. Oh my gosh, I am so happy. I was like in Christmas Wonderland when I saw this card. I was like, yes, yes.
The only thing I would say about this one is I was going to say this is probably the one that players are most likely to try to attack you to take away the Monarch. But
yes,
people don't want to be discarding 2 cards either with the black one, or they don't want to have you making 4/4 angels either. So I don't know if that's necessarily even true.
I hope I get to the point where I can go like the black court into the red court next turn and just look at my opponents and be like, "What up?"
Man. Maybe that's rough. That's those even 2 damage is really, really good. Take out a lot of mana dorks, and there's a lot of commanders that are 2 toughness.
I mean, since we've started doing these notes, I have had nightmares of gameplay sitting across from Chris and just be like, oh, it's my upkeep. This triggers, this triggers, this triggers, this triggers. Oh, and I have a Torbran, so you're actually going to take like 400.
Right.
And also, Chris, I think you pronounced green wrong when you said the best color in Magic.
Oh, I see.
Well, before any fists get flung here, I will jump over to Emberwild Captain, 3 in a red for a Jin Pirate. When Emberwild Captain enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Whenever an opponent attacks while you're the Monarch, Emberwild Captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So we have a built-in mechanic here that is discouraging you from attacking that player after they become the Monarch, in addition to just it being a 4/2 and discouraging an attack.
All these cards are really hard for me because I want to put them all in my decks, and I just don't have the room right now.
Yeah. The biggest problem with Emberwild Captain is it's a great card in a set with 30 other cards that are probably better. Like, in a normal set, we'd probably be kind of raving about what a cool card this is, except for there's so many good cards in this set, it kind of looks a little boring, even though it's really good. So
yeah.
I wish it was a 2/4 though, because I would put this in a Lesha and just keep reanimating it repeatedly.
Oh,
like, I'm
yeah.
the Monarch, I'm the Monarch, I'm the Monarch.
You know, Chris, you said there's so many cards you want to put into some decks. Command Zone has been doing these cool little, like, 1 minute, 2 minute long videos kind of promoting Commander Legends. And one of them is Jimmy creating Ultra Commander or whatever he calls it. And it's like, you start with 400 cards and you have 50 life. And, well, there's your answer. Just play Ultra Commander. Just build a 400 card deck and go.
Anybody want to play that with me? I'm game. Let's do this. I'm not sure
Battle
how I'm going to
Wits,
shuffle
man.
this deck
Yeah.
and not knock it over, but I mean, it's all good.
I think we have an Elemental next here for you, Max.
We do. We have Flamekin Herald. It's a 2 in a red for an Elemental Wizard with a 3/2 body, and commander spells you cast have Cascade, because that's what every deck needs.
No, this is really good. So does this,
Yeah.
the Teamer Cascade legend, I can't think of his name, the 7/7
Maelstrom
for
Wanderer.
7. Yep. Does this give it an additional Cascade then?
Yeah, I would think so. There's no reason it doesn't stack, so I'm sure it does.
So it's going to have triple Cascade?
Yeah.
That's not the scariest thing we're going to talk about today.
Where this probably shines a little bit too is it is an elemental, and Omnath tends to be okay with elementals that can just sacrifice. So you're gonna put that in your Omnath deck and get a free bonus when you cast Omnath, and if you sacrifice it, it deals an additional 5 damage to something, because that's how Angry Omnath works. So there's a little bit of extra value there. That deck tends to be filled with a lot of big beater creatures as well. So Cascade into Avenger of Zendikar or something. I guess Avenger wouldn't work. Well, it would off Omnath because of the casting cost off Angry Omnath. So yeah, it's really, really good. And again, I talked about the Ur-Dragon or one of those things that have a bunch of giant bodies in it, or even something like Kalia the Vast, where Kalia tends to be filled with giant dragons and giant demons and stuff. Cast your Kalia and get one of those giant beater things that your deck is filled with.
Now, I'm pretty sure this is correct, but Cascade doesn't see commander tax, correct? It's just the CMC of the actual card.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So the tax on it wouldn't matter, I don't think. Yeah,
so
I'm sure not.
I kind of want to rebuild Boros with this card just because it's a great card advantage in a color combination. You don't typically have that. So, I mean, most Boros commanders are 4 to 5 mana. Worst case, you're going to hit a mana rock or another support creature or equipment.
And like with all of these, commander spells have whatever, or commander spells do whatever. In a partner deck, that's just twice as many chances to trigger it.
Yes.
So we've Jessica's Will next, the red version of the Will, 2 in a red. So it's a sorcery, and you choose one. If you control a commander, you choose both, and the 2 modes are add a red for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. So you have kind of an impulse draw effect going on for the top 3 cards, and you add red mana for each card in target opponent's hand. Those are both pretty useful modes, especially in Commander, where I think that add a mana for each card in target opponent's hand. Very rarely is there not at least one person holding a full grip or close to it. So there's going to be plenty of times you cast this for even if you just get one mode. If your commander isn't out, you cast it for 3 and wind up with 6. And just got, basically it's a better Dark Ritual at that point almost. And you can cast something in your hand. But if you happen to have your commander out as well and, get those 3 cards that you're casting and have the mana for it. And again, that's kind of worst case scenario. Very rarely are you playing a game where everyone's in top deck mode because their hands are empty. And occasionally you're going to hit that point where the one person that has 12 cards in their hand, and you're going to cast this and get just all the mana in the world to do whatever with, including cast those free cards. So I think this is a really, really useful, I think this may be my favorite of the wills, if not this or the white one, but this one is really, really good, I think. What do you guys think?
I think it's phenomenal, because red's the best color in Magic, so I mean, why not give red an amazing card finally?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. This is a sweet card for either mode, or if you can benefit by getting both of them. It's everything red wants to be doing in EDH, so this is super cool.
Max, Wheel of Misfortune is yours.
Okay, Wheel of Misfortune is 2 and a red for a sorcery, and it has a big old paragraph of text. So each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number, and then each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand and draws 7 cards.
So
this is, wow.
If this, you mentioned a giant block of text, and there is one on here, and that's right now today when they're good at writing text boxes. Imagine if this would have came out in Ice Age. It would have been in that tiny 1-point font, and they would have had...
you wouldn't have been able to read it.
And it would have been 70 lines to try to explain it. I'm not sure about this card. I still haven't entirely internal... Because every player chooses a number, I don't entirely know.
You just choose 0. You just choose 0. That's what you do.
I would assume so, yeah.
But then you don't discard your hand.
It doesn't matter. So what the thing is I did a lot of thinking about this card. And if you want to dodge it, as if you're playing across from it. Now, if you're the one casting it, you don't want to choose 0. But if you're playing across from it, you just choose 0 because the worst case it says, who didn't choose the lowest number. So if you choose the lowest number, you're not going to get dinged. And if, everyone chooses 0, you don't get blasted for it. I mean, pretty much you dodge everything and they just cast the card for no reason.
Yeah, if you want to dodge it, you can dodge it.
Yep.
And not get hit by it. And if you want to, if you're playing that deck, if you're at 40 life, you're like, I'm just going to pay 10 to make sure I get it. Because at that point, maybe you don't care. At that point, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna make sure I get it. I'm gonna hopefully then kind of screw somebody else, the person who paid 3, and they might wind up getting hosed if somebody else paid 5 or something too. Or picked 5.
Yeah, I'm curious what the numbers people are going to throw at it.
Yeah, I
am
am
too. Really
too.
Intriguing card, but I sat and really thought about it hard. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to dodge this card, I'm just going to choose 0 and pray to God that everyone else, chooses the same number as me. So the card just pretty much fizzles and nothing happens.
Well, because there is those situations too where someone casts a wheel and you're like, well, I would rather keep the 3 cards in my hand than draw 7 because the 3 I have in my hand are going to solve that and that and that. Or I can win with this thing in my hand or something. So, being able to opt out is really, really useful as well, I think.
Yeah, I do really like this card, though. It's going to be one of those political cards again, and I love cards like this where it actually makes the table think about what they're going to do. And it's one of those cards I want to play it at 1 o'clock in the morning when everyone's dead tired, not paying attention, and be like, wah!
I mean, worst case, this is just a 3-mana wheel for people who can't afford a Wheel of Fortune.
Right.
Yep.
So who cares if you're going to get hit for life, or maybe you won't even draw cards sometimes, but having the card accessibility, I think, is what is the biggest positive about this card. Is a card very similar to Wheel of Fortune is finally available in masses.
And you do secretly choose that number, but you secretly choose it, but there's no reason you can't all talk about it ahead of time.
Right.
If that's what you want to do, you can go, or at least make some deals with some people about it. They can always backstab you if you're Max, but
and then you scumbag your way and make sure nobody draws any cards.
Exactly.
See, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry a 20-sided die with me and just set it on the table and be like, you guys want to play a little bit of game of gambling and just roll this, and whatever the number is that you roll is what your number you're choosing.
Nice. Well, Chris, I heard you like Cascade. So
I don't.
What if we put some Cascade in your Cascade?
What is this card? I don't even understand this. So we got Apex Devastator for 10 mana, 8 colorless, double green for a 10/10 Chimera Hydra that has Cascade, 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 and Cascade again. And you know what? Let's just Cascade 4 times in a row. And oh my gosh, that's too much, man. For 10 mana, you can cast anything in your deck. I mean, it doesn't matter what you Cascade into. It's coming out.
Yeah, you're probably going to, occasionally green's got a few things once in a while that are more than 10 that you won't hit. You didn't get your Galta for free, boo-hoo. But you're going to get a bunch of busted stuff. I mean, I'd say the only thing that'd be a kind of ironic thing about this is so many Hydras. Like, there's people that like someone's Hydra tribal deck's like, oh, sweet. Oh, no. 3/4 of my Hydras are 0/0s and come into play
Yes,
with
they
like
are.
counters or something. So, like, I'm just going to, half of them will die when I hit them off Cascade. That's kind of unfortunate that the deck that maybe most wants this is the deck where it's the worst. But
honestly, I think even in like a big green beater deck, this wouldn't be bad.
Yes.
This could be like the very, very top of your curve type of deal. And
Sure.
because it's got, I don't look at it as 10 mana. I look at it, as like a 2 mana card that you're going to get, 8
Right.
mana worth of stuff
Yeah.
out of.
When you're green, 10 mana, that's turn 4. You can get there.
I was going to say, you're going to win on, hey, you can cast the Great Henge off the Cascade.
Right,
That's perfect.
right, there we go. Oh, that's gross.
Is it safe to guess that Apex Devastator 8 Maelstrom Wanderer, seeing that it has 4 instances of Cascade instead of 2?
It
Yeah,
must
right,
have or
yeah,
something.
could be. That would make sense.
Or Maelstrom Wanderer breaded or something,
Right.
been hiding it.
We have Court of Bounty next, the green court, 2 green. When it enters battlefield, you become the monarch like they all have. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. And if you're the monarch, instead, you may put a creature or land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, all right. So it's a 4-mana exploration, I guess, that makes you the monarch. And if you maintain the monarch, you can play creature spell or play a creature spell for free.
Yeah, you get to play that stupid Chimera thing.
Right.
Right.
Well, play isn't cast, though.
That's true. The Apex Devastator only works off cast, so I guess you wouldn't want to put that into play. This is good, but I think
10-10.
it's right. This is good, but I think maybe it's not quite as good as it seems at first glance, just because a lot of the stuff you mentioned it, Max, a lot of like the real crazy green stuff has cast triggers. Like, this isn't going to work with a Crater Hoof.
Yeah.
Or any of the Hydras we mentioned where you have to cast them to get the counters on them. There's plenty where it does work, don't get me wrong. But I think it's a good card. I'm not saying it's not. I just feel like when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. And then after the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, there's plenty of situations where, like, looking through my green creatures, I'm like, I don't want to put that into play. I want to cast it. I don't want to put that into play. I want to cast that too. So I think I think in a rune deck or something like that where you're blinking stuff and all your creatures tend to have ETBs, it's definitely really good. Outside of that, I don't know if it's as effective in green as some of the other ones are in their respective colors. What do you think, Max?
I definitely think if we had not just come off of Zendikar Rising and a core set that had some landfall mechanics and, Theros that had some land shenanigans in it, if we had not just come off of all those sets where land was pretty prominent or something happened to your lands, this would look a lot better.
Yeah.
But seeing that we just came off of a bunch of stuff that lets you play extra lands or has an effect when a land comes into play and you can repeat that a bunch of times, this just is kind of in those shadows. So
Sure.
I definitely think there's a home for this somewhere, like in my 3 CMC or greater Chulane deck that I never play. This will probably go in there because I'm just dropping blockers until
Sure.
I amass a board state until I can swing and win. But I definitely don't, think it's a super all-star. I think it's good, but not great.
Yeah, give an example. I was like, okay, well, my Enchantress deck, I'm like, okay, that would be maybe kind of useful there. Number one, it's an enchantment, so it's going to draw me a card. There's a handful of things that care about devotion in there. Hey, it's providing me 2 green for my devotion. That's useful. And if I maintain the Monarch, I can play an Argothian Enchantress for free. Who cares? Like, so many of the Enchantresses are so cheap anyway. I'm not sure if you're getting enough value off them for it to matter. If you're playing an elf deck or something, I'm not sure if that matters that much to be able to save a couple mana on an elf once in a while. So yeah, I think we all kind of agree it's good and has some homes, but I think some of the other ones kind of popped a little more than this one did. Max, let's talk about Elk.
I am an elk. I'm a proud member of the Elks
You are
Lodge.
actually literally an elk.
But yeah, we're going to talk about Dawnglade Regent. It's a 7 mana, 5 green for an 8/8 elk. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And as long as you're the monarch, permanents you control have hexproof. So this is kind of like a privileged position on a stick, and you become the monarch.
Yeah.
And of course, 7 mana in green is like, what, turn 2?
Right.
So
More or
this
less.
is nothing.
And I think elk is kind of their go-to creature type, but they don't want to make something that's going to be like tribally useful. It's like, oh, no one's heard of an elk deck. What does make it an elk?
I mean, Marshall Sutcliffe loves elk, so
That's
this was all for him, I think.
Yep. Shout out
It
to
doesn't
Marshall.
even look like an elk, though. I don't
Right.
I don't know what they were thinking.
It's
It's
the king of the elk.
It's an Ikoria elk, maybe.
I don't know. He ain't got no horns like an elk. He's got like
It-
spines or something.
This is one half of Oko's DNA. Let's put it like that.
There we go.
Similar crown. Don't Google how that happened, but I think this is where Oko came from.
We have Reshape the Earth next, 6 and triple green sorcery. Search your library for up to 10 land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Because I felt like green landfall didn't have enough win conditions. So now you've got one more.
The only thing about this, though, is it's 9 mana, and a lot of times in green, you're not running the mana rocks anyways. Yeah, you're running mana doubler. So by that time that you put in, 10 additional lands, aren't you already so far ahead? I just don't understand it.
You just go, if you're playing, you probably are so far ahead. I think this is definitely a card that you want just for either maybe something like a Shaya where like this is basically gives her +10/+10, or something where you've got a bunch of crazy land. If you do this in Omnath, you make 10 5/5 elementals, and if you happen to have a sack outlet, then you just sack them all and do 30 damage to somebody. So basically it reads 30 damage, assuming you can go get 10 lands if you have a sack outlet and you're playing Omnath. Or if you have a Valkut out, you just go get 10 mountains and you slam somebody for 30 damage there too. I think just in those landfall decks that tend to be doing all of those things, there's almost always going to be a way this is just going to kill somebody probably, if not all the people. So I mean that's really it. I don't think you run it outside of a deck where it winds up being a win condition. But there's a lot of win conditions in green with this, so.
This is like one of those achievement unlocked where it's like, I have no more lands in my deck. What's up?
I have an Avengers Ended card out, and I'm going to put 10 counters on my plants this turn. Yeah.
Ugh.
Max, throw over the commander plate to you, the artifact equipment we're talking about here.
Commander's Plate is artifact equipment, like Dana just said, for a single generic mana, and it says equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. And it has an equip to commander cost of 3 generic mana, or equip to anything else for 5 generic mana. I like this card.
It's not bad at all. I like the 1 casting cost on it. Equips low. I mean... Yep. Even if it is equip 5, to any other creature, so you're looking at 6 mana overall, so it's pretty much like can't even think of that one.
Black Blade Reforge.
There you go. That's a good one to So you get +3/+3 and protection from more than likely 4 colors. So I mean, that's pretty good.
Well, even in a 2-color deck, protection from 3 colors has a pretty good chance of making your thing unblockable to at least one player, if not multiple players. And if you happen to be playing 1-color deck, it's that much better. And if you're playing colorless, it just makes your Traxos or your Hope of Jirper or something untouchable. Nearly, anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, and if you're not playing in black and white, what is that? You dodge, 90% of the removal out there? So, I mean, that's pretty good.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, when I was looking at this card for my decks specifically, I play a lot of white, and I play a lot of green, and I play a lot of blue. So, that's not going to help me. Like, it's protecting from white and green. Well, Generous Gift, Swords, Path. Green is Beast Within, Song of the Dryads, and blue you have any bounce spell. Like, this isn't, for my decks personally, this isn't great. I love it. There are some monocolored decks I have that'll go in, but I think you really have to be aware of, like Chris said, the top removal spells in every color, and, based on your meta or who you play with, how many of those are actually ran. And I think there's a lot more math and statistics involved with this card than just looking at it up front.
Yeah, I would agree. So last but not least here, we'll jump over to the lands, and we got the other half of the Battle Bond cycle. We've talked about those so much when they first came out, and
everybody's talked about
everyone likes them. They're amazing, and I'm glad we finished that cycle, but there's really nothing else new to say. The other kind of relevant, interesting land we got here was War Room. War Room is a land taps for colorless, but the important part here is you can spend 3 mana and pay a life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity and draw a card. So if you are playing a mono white deck or a mono red deck, you can spend 3 mana and lose 1 life and draw a card. But even in Boros or basically any 2-color deck, 2 life to draw a card is a pretty good rate as well. I don't know if I'd want to spend 3 and 3, but 2 doesn't seem unreasonable. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh, it would go in mono white and mono red, maybe Boros, and that's really it. But like as I was looking over my decks, I'm like, okay, well, my Talran deck tends to run, a bunch of instant speed spells, but there's also, if you're playing a counter spell deck of some sort, it's nice to have a way to dump mana if you don't use your counterspell. Well, you hold up a couple blue and go around the table and like, okay, I didn't need to counterspell anything, so I'm just going to dump the mana into War Room and draw a card.
Yeah.
And take 1 or 2 life. That's not terrible, and you're not, it does tap for a colorless mana, which is really easy to do without hurting yourself in a 2-color deck. So in going over my decks, I wound up with I think there's 5 decks I have that I thought, oh, I would run War Room in that, okay. It wouldn't bother me at all.
I think it should go in majority of decks if you're playing 1 or 2 colors. I don't care what color it is, even if you're playing mono blue. It's just because it's a colorless land. And worst case scenario, if you're in that situation where you need to use it to draw a card, you have that ability. So why not play it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was running Arch of Erasca in mono white, spending 5, and technically 6 because you're using the land too.
Yep.
I would absolutely rather pay 2 less mana functionally, but not having to spend as much and the card itself, and lose 1 life to draw than I would run Arch. And Arch only works too if you happen to have
the City's Blessing.
City's Blessing, which you usually do by the time you're in a position to utilize it. But still, this is just a more efficient version of that. Do you have any thoughts on it, Max?
Yeah, I definitely like this. It's a cool card. Like you guys said, Arch of Erasca has a lot of conditions just to be able to use it. I kind of agree. I think 1 and 2 color decks, this is perfect in, depending on what 3 colors you are in. Maybe it does slot into that if you have some life gain or you just need the draw. Yeah, I like Dana. I think I have this slotted into at least 2, if not 3 of my current decks in my stable. So I'm definitely looking forward to giving it a shot. And, Dana's the expert of using your life as a resource. So I totally understand why this is in all of his decks.
Well, that should wrap up the non-legendary cards from Commander Legends. We will come back next week and talk about the 406 different legends are in the set, which is barely an exaggeration.
Close.
Yeah. So and there were so many of these cards that were good, it was kind of difficult to give them the attention they maybe deserved. There was a handful of these cards we could have probably talked about for 15 minutes each. There's so many really interesting, complicated ones here, but we at least got to talk about the ones that have jumped out at us the most. So we'll be back next week. Until then, if you're looking to reach out to us, you can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. You can find our podcast editor, Rafael Garcia, at Ursa Bearwalker. And last but not least, our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Until next week, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.